meeting. Alan, to have it to go through the housekeeping arrangements.
Thank you, Chair. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, please take instruction from staff and stewards. The assembly point is at Tudor Square. Please can I request everyone to switch mobile devices to silent mode so as not to disturb the conduct of the meeting. The meeting today will be webcast and the recording will also be available for people to view later through the Council's website. It is also possible that Sheffield Live TV will record and rebroadcast this meeting. You should be aware that the Council is a data controller under the Data Protection Act. Data collected during this webcast will be retained in accordance with the Council's published policy. By entering the meeting room, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting. While ever the meeting is open to the public, photography, video and sound recording of the proceedings is permitted. However, the Chair has discretion to withdraw or suspend this permission. For example, if the recording is disrupting the conduct of the meeting or is being undertaken in a manner which could capture personal information, or in the event that a member of the public participating in a meeting objects to being recorded. Thank you, Chair.
I'll now ask each member to introduce themselves. I'm Councillor Alan Woodcock, Councillor for East Ecclesfield Ward.
Councillor Rob Bannister, Graves Park Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Ibiullah, Netherridge and Sharrow.
Laura Moynihan, Councillor for Manor Castle.
Good afternoon, Councillor Janet Riddler, Councillor for Stocksbridge and Upper Don.
Mark Whittaker, Councillor for Stocksbridge and Upper Don as well. Thank you.
Councillor Willis Marshall, Councillor for Woodhouse Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Gary Weatherall, Shire Green right side. Thank you.
Marianne Elliott, Councillor for Gleaders Valley.
Henry Nottage, Councillor for Hillsborough Ward.
Andrew Sanger, Councillor for Forward Ward.
Glynis Chapman, Councillor for Mosborough Ward.
Cliff Woodcraft, Councillor for Fulwood Ward.
Thank you, members. Abby, do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Mike Chaplin and his substitute is Councillor Ibi Ulla. Apologies from Councillor Tony Downing and his sub is Councillor Laura Moynihan, and apologies from Councillor Nikki Belfield and her sub is Councillor Rob Bannister. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Abby. Do we have any reasons for exclusion of the public and press?
Chair, thank you. You'll note at the end of the supplementary there's a note on the Public Secretary Quality Duty. I'd ask that once Chris has given his introduction to that item, we close the meeting while I give some context to the late representation that's been received that has required that to be included. Thank you, Chair.
Declarations of interest. Rob?
Yeah, just to declare around item 7B, I have previously put on record an official objection to the planning.
Thanks, Rob. Anyone else? No? Minutes of the previous meeting? Yeah, approved, yeah. Thank you. Site visits, the date of the next site visit will be advised to members. Applications of various acts and regulations. We have two applications to hear today. Item 7A, planning application number 25/00413/FUL, Sheffield Car Centre, Eden Park, Penistone Road, Grenoside. Chris, I think that's you. Oh, Andy, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, my name's Andrew Burton. I'm the team leader for the North Area Team Development Management. So this first site concerns a former Sheffield Car Centre, which is located in Grenoside, to the east of the A61 Penistone Road. The site was previously occupied by a split-level building and had an open forecourt, which was for the display of cars that were for sale. Those buildings have recently been demolished as part of the initial implementation of the existing planning permission that this application relates to. That was granted back in 2021 and approved a part 3-storey and part 4-storey building to contain 3 commercial units and 20 apartments. In terms of neighbouring land uses, which you can see there on the slide, we've got residential properties on 3 sides of it, with Rogine Road to the north, Grenfold Road to the east, and Penistone Road to the west. The properties on Rogine Road and Grenfold Road are positioned on a lower ground level. To the south is a church, and just beyond that, we're close to the busy Crossroads junction with Saltbox Lane and Wheel Lane. Here are some recent site photos that are taken from the Penistone Road site frontage. The majority of the site is covered with hard surfacing associated with the former land use and highlight its previously developed nature. The 2 different land levels of the site can be seen on the photo. On the right side, which show the existing access ramp down to the lower section. Also visible are the existing boundary treatments that include a mixture of metal railings, gates, fences and retaining walls. These are some photos of that more hidden lower part of the site, which is to the rear. These were taken post-demolition of the former buildings on the site, and again highlight its split-level nature and that it's previously developed. The photo on the right-hand side is of the rear boundary that's adjacent to the existing houses on Grenfolds Road. It shows tree stumps which originate from a row of conifer trees that were previously in that location. Concerns about the felling of those trees and what that has meant in terms of their screening benefits being taken away features within the 18 objections that have been received from local residents. The site already benefits from full planning permission for development that involved the construction of that part 3-storey and part 4-storey building. As mentioned previously, that will contain 3 commercial units on the ground floor facing towards Penistone Road and 20 apartments on the other floors. The planning permission remains extant and can be built out in full. This amendment application was initially more significant and proposed first and second floor extension to the south side of the building. However, that part was removed following concerns being expressed by officers about the impacts upon the amenity of neighbouring residents. The additional changes that are proposed are considerably less significant in context. One is just to adjust the position of one of the walls of the building in the southwest corner by just under half a metre. That would mean that the changes to the overall site layout would be barely discernible compared to the existing approved version. And that includes the 38 parking spaces in total, which is unchanged from before. This is an extract of the site layout plan, which has been enlarged in an attempt to make that proposed change seen a bit more clearly. So it's the bit that's highlighted in yellow on that slide, so it's just over 5 metre length of walling in that southeast corner of the site, which would just be coming out by an additional, just short of half a metre towards that southern boundary. The other main change to the approved plans is to replace the glazing on the secondary stairwell on the side of the building with a solid wall. So on the top of the slide there, that's the existing approved version. And if you can see there on the bottom, in terms of again, spot the difference, we're just losing those double windows towards the left-hand side of that side elevation. That's just happened as a result of a recommendation from the applicant structural engineer, advising it's important for the structural integrity of the building. The other elevations would essentially remain unchanged compared to the previously approved plans. this is the rear elevation, and that's just on here for completeness because technically it has changed, and that would be wider by just under half a metre. In addition to the plan changes, it's proposed to vary two of the conditions on the existing planning permission. So the first of those is condition 40, which proposed to vary the hours of opening for the convenience store, and that's just to increase it on the Sundays, which is currently restricted to 8 AM to 8 PM, and that's to make it 7 AM to 11 PM on every day of the week. That would be similar opening times to the existing small supermarkets located around the city, such as Tesco Extras and Sainsbury's Locals. In addition, it's proposed to amend condition 41 to make it possible for commercial deliveries to be undertaken on Sundays and bank holidays between the hours of 9 AM and 6 PM. Currently, that condition 41 prevents that from happening at all on Sundays and bank holidays. There's no proposal to alter the delivery times which are permitted on the other days of the week. Those are already allowed to take place between 7 AM and 9 PM. 18 objections have been received from local residents. Residents' objections are supported by Sheffield Parish Council and Grenoside Conservation Society. Many of the main points refer to concerns about the form of the development already approved. However, the existing planning permission remains extant and can still be carried out. There's no scope to revisit those issues, therefore. More relevant objections have been received in relation to loss of vegetation and the immediacy implications of the increased delivery times and opening times. Concerns relate to the potential damage to third-party land and encroachment and non-material planning considerations. However, directors have proposed to remind the applicant of their responsibilities and in relation to the Party Wall Act. We have the committee report which summarises the assessment the proposals that have been carried by officers. For the additional extensions, part of the initial set of plans being taken off, the remaining changes are considered very minor in the context of the overall development. It's therefore considered that they would not significantly alter the original design or result in any additional impacts upon amenity. It's accepted that the proposed changes to conditions 40 and 41 are sensitive in residential amenity terms. However, those changes being considered by our Environmental Protection Service resolved not to object. This is taking into account that the hours that are proposed to amend the delivery times to on the Sundays and bank holidays would fall well within the opening times that are already permitted for the store to open, and would be during the times of the day when activity and background noise levels from the neighbouring A61 are already high. In terms of proposal to increase the hours of opening for the convenience store for Sundays and bank holidays, EPS state that change would make the opening hours the same as the local supermarkets elsewhere in the city. Also noted that the previous 2008 permission allowed 6 AM opening Monday to Saturday and 7 AM on Sunday. Taking those things on board, the proposal will not cause additional noise and disturbance that would justify the application being refused in their view. Concerns related to the loss of conifers were acknowledged. However, the plans show that replacement vegetation will be installed in that boundary. This would be secured for the existing conditions 17 and 18. So overall and in summary, officers of the view that the proposed amendments to the previously approved plans and to conditions 40 and 41 are acceptable, and the recommendation is one of approval therefore, and that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. We don't have any speakers on this, so we can go straight to members' questions. Henry?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the justification provided for the change of design to remove the windows to protect the structural integrity of the building, I'm kind of struggling to get my head around that because I see a lot of buildings that have got windows and the building hasn't been built yet. Is is there a sort of solid ground why it would be more structurally sound to not have windows at this point?
I mean, I think one thing to note, those windows were only due to serve as secondary staircase anyway, and it has been done on the advice of the applicant's own structural engineer, and I think it's to do with it in part as well, that wall moving further south by just under half a metre, which then it's kind of going to become a party wall on that boundary too. So I think in terms of how it affects appearance, I don't think it's neither here nor there. It is on the side elevation, so it's not as prominent as what it would be on the front elevation facing Penistone Road. We've got the appearance of those protected, that'd be an active frontage on there. So I think we're just taking a pragmatic view on it and thinking that because it wouldn't detract or harm the appearance and it's only a secondary staircase, I don't think it's significant enough to be arguing back to say that it must be pulled back. Okay.
Randy?
Thanks, Chair. Can I just talk about this change to the opening hours and delivery times? And Environmental Protection Service are now saying that in 2008 they had Sunday opening, but they didn't spot that in their concerns in the paper in February 22. So they're going back to the 2008 position rather than the February 22. Explain to me what has happened in the last 3 years to change the view of Environmental Protection Service in terms of their comments on Sunday opening and the delivery times.
Yeah, I mean, I think my understanding is that they might have set out those conditions before as to what their preference was. They've then been approached by the applicant to see if there is any flexibility on both those times for the hours of opening of the convenience store and for deliveries. I think they've undertaken a benchmarking exercise to see what the opening hours are on comparable convenience stores around the city. Like I mentioned, your likes of Tesco Extras and Sainsbury's Local are generally allowed to open. They're exempt from like the Sunday trading laws, and they can actually open below 280 square metres of floor space from 7 a.m. till 11 p.m. 7 days a week. So having undertaken that benchmarking exercise, and also noticed that on a 2008 permission, they allowed 6 a.m. opening Monday to Saturday and 7 a.m. on Sunday. They felt that, faced with this application, that it wouldn't be reasonable or justifiable position for them to object.
Thank you. So can I just check that this benchmarking does include other similar, larger convenience stores where with flats, very nearby, as in this application, because clearly some of those convenience stores don't have flats that, immediately, either immediately above it or immediately adjacent to it. So can I just check the benchmarking is comparing like with like? Thanks.
I mean, that's what they've sort of stated within their response. I did personally take a look at the ones for the Tesco Extra that's the crossroads. It's at Dykeshall Road in Wadsley, and that's got the 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. all 7 days of the week, and also the Sainsbury's Local that's up in South Road at Crooks, and both of those are in fairly close, sited well within residential areas with residential properties in very close proximity.
Mariam?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. Why on earth were the conifers removed? I mean, in all seriousness, at page 42, it says that the the high conifer hedgerow provided a good level of natural screening, and that it was the understanding of the officers that the trees were going to be retained. Was a condition not secured on that at the time?
No, I think that has been clarified in the report. So, I mean, what I've got on there is, because I've tried to fit it all onto one slide, it might not make it the clearest, but that's the existing approved site layout plan on the left-hand side, and the current one on the right-hand side. So we're looking towards the top right-hand corner in both cases, where you've just got that sort of like green verge that's indicated. There is an annotation that's on that, and that just says that a planting screen is to be provided in that location. It didn't explicitly state that it would be the existing trees being retained. I think the understanding is that they'd have to take them out just so they can create those parking bays for them to be the full necessary length in order to meet the design standards for the correct size bays.
Okay, so new similar planting will be put in?
Yeah, that's right. We've got it as, well, there's three conditions actually. So we've got one which requires them to submit full landscaping details, including planting specifications, before they begin development fully. They've then got to cultivate all that planting so that if we get any failures of the planting within the first 5 years, then that has to be replaced. There is also an existing condition which relates to them having to provide full details of boundary treatments as well to be submitted and approved, and certainly there'd be a commitment at this end in order to ensure that that boundary is provided with sufficient, an effective privacy screen, so to replace something, that was quite similar to the benefits that those previous conifers provided.
Okay, thank you. I think that does exemplify why we do need to make sure conditions are robust in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, my question was also in relation to removal of mature hedging and conifer tree, which Councillor Elliott has asked and the officer has clarified. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions? No? Move to comments. Henry?
Thank you, Chair. Based on concerns from residents relating to our nuisance and antisocial behaviour and the benchmarking comparison to the Tesco up at Dykesall Road, which as a ward member I'm aware is a problem for antisocial behaviour, I would like to propose that conditions 40 and 41 are not amended.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Just in terms of that, I just think it would be useful to hear again why you're proposing not to amend those.
Because they would create a nuisance for local residential properties further to the extant condition.
Can I ask the planning officer to detail if you think that's sufficient? Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. A bit of interference as well. Yeah, so just confirming there. I mean, I think, just wanted to set out the context a little bit. So in terms of that proposed increase of hours for the convenience store, then across all 7 days of the week, all we're actually talking about is them being asked to open 3 additional hours on the Sunday and bank holidays, and that would only be by 1 additional hour in the morning and 2 additional hours, so 3 additional hours in the evening, isn't it? 8 to 11. So, is that a reasonable and justifiable worry? I think probably not, to be honest, in terms of how it's allowed to operate on the other days of the week already. So yeah, that would be my opinion on the situation.
Mark?
To me, I think this is a good development. We need to show the communities generally that we are building on brownfield sites. It's definitely a brownfield site. I think it's the right fit for this particular site. The only concern I would possibly have is if the parking is not sufficient and parking spills out onto parking on the road, because it is a very busy road there. Thank you.
Andrew?
Yeah, sorry about that. I mean, in terms of the number of parking spaces, that's unchanged from before, so it's 38 spaces are proposed, and nothing within this application is going to increase that demand compared to how it was before. So if we took the view last time around that the amount of parking provision was acceptable, I'm not thinking that there would be anything within this application, any reasonable grounds to say that it's now we need more spaces or that it's not acceptable provision. I don't know if you'd want to add anything to that at all, Helen.
Thanks, Chair. No, I don't think there's anything to add. Thank you.
Laura?
Thank you. Businesses have got to be competitive, so I hear what you're saying about the hours, but I think we've benchmarked what similar convenience stores are open, and it would be unreasonable to put this particular development at a disadvantage, I think, in terms of business operations. And in terms of antisocial behaviour, I don't think it happens at a specific time. So I wouldn't support that change. I think they should have the extended hours in terms of employment and viability of the business. Thank you.
Rob?
In terms of the parking, will there be an expectation that there'll be restrictions on it, like say the ones around the back are zoned for the residents and the ones at the front are there for the convenience store? So I'm just thinking so the local residents wouldn't clash with shoppers.
I'll just make a comment. Within about 3 miles, there's 1, 2, 3 co-op stores. One in Burn Cross, one in High Green, and one in Chapeltown. And they all open these hours that's being requested. And they do have apartments above each one of them. So, you know, that's something to bear in mind when you vote. Do you have any more comments?
Chair, can I just add, I think the proposal there is for neither of the conditions to be amended, is that correct? Was it both conditions you were suggesting not to be
for 41 and 42?
Yeah.
As much as I'm aware that there isn't a lot of love in the room for what I've suggested, I think procedurally we could vote on it and move on.
Well, just on that, I just think it may be useful if you could separate the proposal into both conditions, because I think unless you're quite content that the reason that you're proposing it is for on social behaviour for both both the conditions, obviously the opening hours and the deliveries.
The nuisance for residents was more to do with extended delivery hours, as well as extended hours. But you know, I'm aware at this point that this is going to fall. So,
Thank you. Just on that then. So you're just acknowledging that there are different reasons for each condition that you're proposing to not be amended. That's all I wanted to drive at. Thank you.
So we're going to go with a vote on your amendment, unless it's withdrawn.
for the sake of 30 seconds time in the room, I'll withdraw it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Henry. We'll now move to a vote then. Rob?
Approved.
Oh, show of hands.
Yeah.
Right, I keep forgetting it's a show of hands, so all those...
Are you voting for the application there? For the... Oh, yeah.
It's been withdrawn.
Yeah, sorry.
Been withdrawn.
I'm confused there.
So it's a vote on the changes that the officer presented. So it's show of hands. Oh, do you want to come in, Abby? No? So it's just a show of hands now, please. Those four.
Okay, so that's 10.
Against? 2.
Yeah.
No abstentions. Thank you. That vote is carried. Do you want to carry on, or would you like a quick couple of minute break, 10-minute break, or carry on? Carry on, that's fine. So, the next planning application number 24/03241, full, land adjacent to Norton Free Church of England Primary School, Norton Lane, Sheffield, page 45 of the agenda. Officer, please.
Sorry.
Chris.
Sorry, yes, sorry. We just need to wait for Rob to leave.
Thank you, Chair. So the application site is a field, essentially, off Norton Lane, identified here on the plan and the aerial image. It lies opposite Oaks Park, which you can see just on the other side of Norton Lane there, and adjacent the primary school listed in the address on the documents, which is to the east. The green space you see there is associated with the primary school. And then you can see immediately to the northwest of the site is housing on Waterfall Close. Just at the very top of the image is further housing on Summer House Drive. The proposal is for 13 houses, detached and semi-detached houses, and they're a mixture of 4 two-bedroom properties, 8 three-bedroom properties, and 1 four-bedroom property. They'll be of stone and buff brick construction, all with slate tiles, dark grey roofs with solar panels applied. There are, I'll just quickly flick to a layout while I'm going through this. There are 2 to 4 parking spaces per dwelling. The majority of the trees that you saw on this image there, the aerial view, are retained within the site layout, and additional planting is provided, which I'll talk a little bit more about later on. The representations are as listed in the main agenda report, with 30-something objections, reference, Chair, and there are more to reference in the supplementary report at the end of this. You have to bear with me, Chair, it's quite a lengthy introduction, this. In terms of development plan, the site is identified in the UDP, which is the current document, alongside the core strategy, as being a housing area, as are the sites adjacent. When I say that, I mean those sites following Norton Lane, on the northern side of Northern Lane towards the water tower, which is just off the view. Oh, sorry, going too far. No, leave it on that one, I think. Yes, so their housing allocation. So housing is a preferred use in policy terms, subject to compliance, the development's compliance with other criteria, including policy G10, which seeks to secure and retain green corridors throughout the city. They are identified on a policy map, which I think here we are, this is a small extract from it that covers the whole of the city. And you'll see there, Chair, it's a diagrammatic, schematic plan of corridors existing and future, and where there are weaknesses. The point of this slide, Chair, is to demonstrate that is what they are, a diagrammatic corridor rather than one that's defined specifically on the ground, and to show as best as we can, an indication of the size of the site within the corridor, which is the little red circle, and its approximate position. So their purpose is to secure green corridors for both visual benefit and for the travel of wildlife and development of habitats. So the proposal, given its retention of, sorry, the slide's in a slightly unusual order, of large areas of green space around the edges of it and below it and within the site, and its low density. We feel that this proposal doesn't conflict with the aims of that policy. The development is a barrier to achieving those substantial links. The site is greenfield. Members will be familiar with Policy CS 24, which allows for 12% of housing developments to be on greenfield sites throughout the period of the plan, and at the moment we're at around 6 or 7%, so it's considerably below that, and a development of 13 units will not change that figure. So overall, there is no conflict with the main principles within the development plan. The report refers to the emerging plan, and a lot of the representations do, Chair, because in the emerging plan, in what seems to be an error, the site is allocated as urban green space, although the sites to the north-east of that, heading towards the water tower, remain as residential zone. Notwithstanding that, that policy has limited weight because it's an emerging plan. But notwithstanding that, there is no conflict, we don't feel, with that designation, as the draft policy GS1 sets criteria for development within urban green spaces. And they seek to avoid the loss of open space, public space, and development of areas of high amenity value. And this site isn't one of those. It's not open space. It's not accessible to the public. It's in all, to all intents and purposes, a field. Retaining the green frontage to Norton Lane and the links between the site, we feel, maintains compliance with the draft policy GS1, albeit it has very limited weight. There is a loss of 3 very small, you can just about see in the middle of the site, 3 very small oak trees within the site, and 1 large sycamore where that boundary kinks, for want of a better expression, as it heads down towards, as the eastern boundary heads down towards Norton Lane. There is 1 sycamore there, which is referred to as T18 in the conditions and perhaps in the report too. But in the context of that, there are 4 trees being removed and 24 being replanted as part of the layout of the site. Given the proximity of the site to Oaks Park, to the southeast, Oaks Park is a listed park, historic park, so we have to have regard to the impact on the heritage asset, and in particular upon its setting. But again, because of the retention of the green boundary, the vegetation on the Norton Lane frontage, the hedgerows either side, the low density of the development, we don't feel that does impact in a harmful manner upon that setting. The accommodation itself within the site is of good quality. You can see it's a low density scheme. There are no situations where within the site there's any overlooking, overshadowing concerns. The properties are substantial. They offer good quality living conditions. And in terms of the relationship to neighbouring properties, the development comfortably exceeds our guidelines in terms of distances, separation distances from property to property, window to window distances, that kind of thing. So there is no demonstrated harmful impact upon neighbouring properties. As I said at the beginning, the parking is well provided for, exceeding our guidelines, and the access onto Norton Lane at the bottom there has been deemed to be appropriate and acceptable. There was an ecology survey undertaken on the site which didn't demonstrate the presence of any protected species, but there was potential in T18, the sycamore tree that's been removed, for bat roosts, although none were located. So condition 12 on the recommended approval, requires a check for bats before that tree is removed, and if they are found, then appropriate mitigation measures to secure their safe relocation. There is a net loss of habitat on the site as a result of the development. So in accordance with BNG legislation, the Environment Act, the mandatory condition secures a 10% off-site biodiversity net gain, although there are some enhancements on site too. There are no objections to the drainage strategy. The drainage strategy assesses the options, has ruled out the possibility of infiltration, which is one of the preferred options, and considers that the passage of the various water, etc., to the network is the appropriate method. Our own drainage team and Yorkshire Water agree with that, but the final design hasn't been resolved yet. It will either be a gravity system towards Norton Lane or a pumped system via Summerhouse Drive. Either option is acceptable in principle. The details are required to be submitted through the conditions. So overall, given that there's no harmful impact on the heritage asset, the tilted balance, and the absence of a 5-year housing supply, the tilted balance is in play in accordance with paragraph 11 of the MPPF. There are benefits to the scheme, Chair, in the provision of 13 houses within a designated housing area. The economic benefits that result from the construction and occupation of those properties within the area, and the only adverse impact is the development of an undeveloped site within a green corridor. But for the reasons I explained, we feel that that's being done in an acceptable manner. So overall, there are no these benefits significantly and demonstrably outweigh that potential harm. So we're recommending approval, Chair. I'll just pause there because there is a very lengthy I'm sorry, this sometimes is necessary, lengthy supplementary information, which I'm happy to go through, Chair, but I would understand if members wanted a bit of time to read that. If you're happy for me to go through it, then I will speed through it if you like, and then if members do want the time, obviously we can arrange that.
Can I just ask if you want Chris to go through it, or?
Okay, thank you, Chair. So, the first section is on representations. So we've received 6 further objections following the publication of the report from 5 different addresses, including the Friends of Graves Park. All the representations, or the people making representations, have previously provided quite similar comments on the application, so I will speed through these because they'll otherwise be listed in the main report. Some were sent directly to the Chair and committee members and subsequently shared with officers, and the others were sent directly to officers. So there's reference to a lack of notice in terms of time and formal notification for the committee meeting, that the number of planning conditions recommended to be imposed is excessive, and a number of the conditions require information to be submitted post-decision. They highlight their drainage, the construction environmental management plan and hard landscaping. There's reference to an initial objection from Yorkshire Water, changes in position on the suitability of the site, issues such as car parking, visibility displays, accuracy of plans. There is a list there, Chair. I'll go through every single one of them because they're quite easy for members to digest quite shortly, I think, in quite a short length of time. I'm just trying to pick out the ones that perhaps need a little bit further discussion and explanation. We say then on the next page that many of those issues raised are already covered in the report. Those around housing need, parking, access safety, the siting of the houses, and the emerging plan designation. And the others that perhaps aren't are the ones I'll cover briefly. So in terms of notice for the committee meeting, we publish how we organise our committees on the council's website, and this case followed all those procedures. We don't, as we've discussed many times before, Chair, individually notify all objectors because of the volume, that just isn't practical, but we do identify particular interest groups where they're obvious to us. And in this case, the Friends of Graves Park and Gleaders Valley Wildlife Trust were contacted by email by the case officer last week. Reference to the number of planning conditions, those that we've recommended are very typical for a development of this nature and scale, and that application process will provide ample opportunity to ensure the submitted details are acceptable and further scrutiny of those. In terms of the Yorkshire Water objection, they did send a letter objecting to the development in December due to concerns around public water supply infrastructure. However, they then followed that up with an amended letter in January, providing updated comments that didn't object and instead recommended some of the conditions that are now included in the agenda pack, Chair. In terms of a change in the council's position on the site, it isn't clear what that's a reference to, but as members are aware, each application is determined on its own merits, based on the policy, environment and material considerations that apply to it at the time. And the report sets out the reasons why planning permission has been recommended to be granted in this case. In terms of visibility displays, the conditions recommended to be imposed, which requires visibility displays to be kept clear, avoiding overgrowing vegetation at all times. The working hours in the construction environmental management plan are standard advice from the Council's Environmental Protection Service, and that particular directive is included on all planning consents where a KEMP, as we refer to it, is considered necessary. Biodiversity net gain and the community infrastructure levy, both those regimes apply to this development and their mechanisms are set out in separate legislation. That can't be adapted to suit an individual application. Contract parking, highways legislation can to a degree control how vehicles park on the highway before an application has been implemented, but notwithstanding that, there is a condition recommended to be imposed that will require submission of details for contractor parking during the construction development. Again, that's quite a standard requirement, Chair. This should say communication between developer and objectors rather than objections. There's no requirement for a developer to liaise directly with, to consult with neighbours. Some do, some don't. We will encourage it on larger scale developments that are likely to have a wider impact. But there is no requirement for it, so that isn't a material consideration for the application. There was reference to accuracy of plans and confusing description or depiction of levels within the site. And there are some different references to site levels within the report, but they are referring to two different changes in levels within the site. So one is a reference to the distance from front to back across the whole of the site. The other is in relation to relationship to housing. So we've explained that there. And then the final one is the impact of the development on adjoining occupiers with complex needs. And there's a section here on public sector equality duty. And I know we're going to go into a closed session afterwards, but I do need to read through this beforehand, Chair. That's my understanding. So one of the representations refers to the impact of the development, in particular the construction, the construction thereof would have upon occupants of a dwelling bordering the site on waterfall close. So for clarity, they're the houses to the northwest of the site there at the top of the drawing, top left-hand corner of the drawing. The public sector equality duty requires public authorities in carrying out their functions to have due regard to the need to achieve the objectives set out under section 149 of the Equality Act 2020, which is to eliminate discrimination, harassment, victimisation and any other conduct that's prohibited by or under the Equality Act, advance equality of opportunity between persons who share a relevant protected characteristic and persons who don't, and foster good relationships between persons who share a relevant protected characteristic and persons who don't share it. In considering this application, the Council as Planning Authority has had due regard to the provisions of the Act. So, protected characteristics, I will go through them, age, disability, gender reassignment, pregnancy, maternity, race, religion or belief, sex and sexual orientation. In this context, therefore, due regard should be had to factors such as whether the proposed development advances equality of opportunity for people with any protected characteristic to enjoy and benefit from the development, or adversely affects those people compared to persons who do not share that characteristic. Factors that must be taken into account include whether the development removes, minimises or exacerbates disadvantages suffered by persons with a protected characteristic, take steps to meet needs of persons who share protected characteristics that aren't different to the needs of persons who do not have it, and encourages persons with a protected characteristic to participate in public life or other activity in which participation by such persons is proportionately low. Article 8 of the Human Rights Act is also relevant regarding the right to respect for their private and family life. This is, however, a qualified right, meaning that they are balanced against the needs of society and can be restricted if it's lawful for a legitimate aim, necessary and proportionate. So it's acknowledged that development can lead to noise and disturbance and that this can have a greater impact upon some people than others. For context, the proposed dwellings themselves are set some 18 to 20 metres from the nearest properties. So that means, Chair, that the distance from the detached property, the two properties to the top left and the detached property is in the order of 18 to 20 metres from those properties at the back there. Obviously, the properties are closer to the rear boundary of those. And at their closest are 8 metres from the boundary of the site. Though associated external works can clearly cause disturbance, there will be a need for tree protection fencing approximately 5 metres from the rear garden boundaries of properties on Waterfall Close, such that the nearest point of activity on this site will be about 5 metres from the boundary. Paragraph 198 of the NPPF requires decisions to consider the impacts of development on living conditions and quality of life, and in doing so should seek to avoid noise giving rise to significant adverse impacts on health and the quality of life, with reference to the noise policy statement for England, which in paragraph 2.24 requires all reasonable steps to be taken to mitigate and minimise adverse impact, but makes clear that this does not mean such adverse impacts cannot occur. Construction noise is the most significant concern in relation to the points raised, as post-development noise impacts would be limited to that associated with domestic occupation and occasional manoeuvring of vehicles within 5 metres of the northwestern boundary of the site. That, Chair, is reference to, I think it's perhaps clearer on that plan. Immediately to the left of the red house is an area that would involve vehicle turning, were the residents in the 2 blue houses in the left corner entering and leaving their properties. So that's the nearest point that there would be any vehicle movements. I've just lost my place in describing that, just bear with me. The planning practice guidance advises that noise impacts may be partially offset if residents have access to one or more of an alternative quiet facade, alternate private amenity space for the sole use or by a limited group of residents, and a public park within 5 minutes walking distance. This is the case for residents of Waterfall Close, should be, with an area of green space partially fenced immediately opposite their properties. That's just off this map, Chair. Again, looking away, I've lost my place, just bear with me. And a facade of dwellings facing that particular piece of grass. Graves Park is approximately 8 minutes walk from Waterfall Close. Condition 10 requires the developer to submit and adhere to a construction environmental management plan, and that's intended to prevent nuisance and minimise disamenity at nearby sensitive uses. This sits alongside a directive listing what needs to be included in that future submission. And it's recommended that this directive be amended slightly, Chair, to include a minimum requirement to incorporate, but not be limited to, suitable boundary treatment to be erected on the north-western boundary of the site to mitigate the noise and visual changes associated with the construction period. And that has been agreed with the applicant's agent, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Chair, as mentioned earlier, I'd like to move into a closed session now, just so that I can provide the details within the objection that include personal data, and then we'll return. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vicky. So, we'd like the public to remove themselves, please, just while this is discussed. As soon as Marianne's back, we will start, and it will be speakers next, so I'll call you out as we get. Against this application, the first one being David Blagden, and each speaker will have 5 minutes. So David, please, you can come to the desk and press the button on the right. It should light that up.
Well, I would like to thank everybody for allowing us to actually come here today and make representation against this this planning application. With some context in terms of why I'm here and why I'm sort of objecting to this application. I've lived in Norton, man and boy, since 1981. So I've lived there nearly 44 years, 45 years next year. And I've seen the general degradation of Norton as an area in terms of overdevelopment, overburden on infrastructure, lack of investment in infrastructure, and to be honest, some pretty poor decisions from the planning authority in terms of supporting Norton, in terms of how it should develop for its residents. I'd also like to say as well, I've worked in the construction industry in the Sheffield City region for 38 years, and I've seen the outcome of poor planning decisions. And it's very easy to identify when you see the level of information that's been presented today, what's going to go wrong. I would like to thank the planning officer for his presentation, and what he has done is actually identify succinctly the issues with permitting this development and not the solutions. Now, I don't intend sort of reviewing all the conditions and telling you this is wrong, that's wrong, and the other's wrong. There's been a lot of information in terms of the objections, in terms of the information that's been circulated to everybody around this table, and you're here for a reason. You're here to understand that information, understand the objections, and actually make the right decision from that point and that point forward. Just to highlight some of the issues that I can see, I did have 10 points, but I'll try and be quite succinct in that because I know another resident in the area has got other comments to make. From my personal perspective, 21 conditions which are fundamental decision making in the design of this project is wrong to have at this stage. These should be challenged, these should be corrected, amended and detailed by the developer now, not on condition when we all know when conditions are granted with a consent. Yeah, you submit something, that'll do, that's fine. These issues need addressing now. These conditions need removing now before we end up with a development that's not satisfactory, which is, despite the policy that we seem to be hiding behind for the urban development plan and the green space plan, it's a green space. It's been a green space for the last 41 years. It needs to be kept a green space for the benefit of Norton. Environmental impact, it's a significant one. The very generic reports that have been submitted by the developer don't address the issues. The vague, the contradictory conclusions say different things. What is the impact and the environmental impact in this green corridor? This green corridor is preserved for the transition of wildlife across the region, not to be built on. Highways. Highways is a fundamental issue with this development. Norton Lane infrastructure has had no investment for 41 years. We're now proposing to put an access road into a new housing development on a blind bend. The developer's own transport consultants information says there's 80,000 journeys on that road in a 7-day period, of which 26% of those journeys are over the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. How can it make sense to encourage a new entrance with new cars onto a blind bend? It doesn't make sense to me. Local infrastructure I've touched on, it's overburdened. That includes the drainage system and supplies. You know, yes, we have a solution which works for the drainage team. Does it? I live there. I've experienced these issues. There's an attenuation tank on Norton Green that has to cater for the gradual release of surface water into the drainage system. That says to me, overburden that supply, you'll create issues. Environmental impact, I've talked about. Significant loss to the local area, affecting wildlife movement. Bats, I think bats, somebody mentioned bats in the conversation outside. Sit in my back garden, there's bats flying about, they're circulating all the time. What's the response? How do we deal with that? How do we deal with the impacts on the environment? Car parking. Car parking is always a bone of contention with any site development. Policy dictates that you should have two. Sorry, just one more if I could. Just on this car parking.
Yep.
Sorry, and perhaps I'm repeating others, but car parking dictates that the housing development and the number of people in these houses is 65 people, potentially. Each could own a car. Policy dictates 26 car parking spaces. Where does the overspill go? It can't go on Norton Lane because it's dangerous. Where does it go? This site needs reviewing in context of where it is and the impact it has on people and residents, not by policy and governance. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Our next speaker is Mike Johnson, please. You'll have, again, 5 minutes, Michael.
Thank you. My name is Michael Johnson. I live at 6 Sumhouse Drive, so my house backs onto this proposed development. First, I'd like to thank Councillor Steve Avis and Mohammed Mahouf, who've been very supportive in terms of listening to some of our grievances and concerns. In fact, I wouldn't have known about this meeting had we not had a leaflet through our letterbox 3 days ago. And I think that goes for most of my neighbours as well. How on earth can we come and represent ourselves at these meetings if we get such short notice before they start? My house is part of the Miller House Homes development. Flat site, a flat brownfield site, and the estate was built on the site of the old Oaks Park School. Local search at the time showed that the fields at the back were designated as urban green space, and the land was defined as a strategic green corridor. Perfect for buying a house, albeit as a bit of a premium rate because of its location. And also, Miller Homes had planned the site so there were nice green spaces in front of the house as well, in front of the houses as well. So it was a lovely place to come to live. I lived in the Norton area and Woodseats area since 1972. And like David, I've seen some of the degradation that's gone on in the area with planning that should really not have gone ahead. The field itself, I'm a real nature lover, and I've been monitoring nature there for nine years since I've been there. 40 species of bird recorded, roe deer regular visitors to the field, badgers, foxes, and even occasional hedgehogs. I mean, we're losing our hedgehogs, for goodness sake. As David said, bats appear in the summer. They're flying around the house. I have no idea where the roosts are, but neither have the developers either. Neither is anybody in this room. But they need to be protected. So I, like 30 other nearby residents and various groups, object to this development. Can I just ask how many supporters have there been for this particular development? Do we know? Chris? Oh, sorry. Can I ask a question too? I can't ask questions. Okay, thank you very much. So my main reasons for objecting are, it's a designated urban green space. Being told by the council, oh, sorry, that was a mistake, is not really good enough. I bought the house in good faith on the basis of solicitor searches. The land has never been built on. It's a beautiful asset to Sheffield and its local community. provider of flora and fauna and animal habitat. The proposed houses are on a significant elevation to the site, to our site. So although in the documentation it talks about something like 60 centimetres of raised land, just from my house to the back of my garden goes up a metre. We're probably talking about 2.5 metres to the top of the field, and then it drops down again towards Norton Lane. So those houses, I think what was the term that was used? Oh yes, there would be no overheading of land, but those houses actually were looking down onto the Summerhouse Drive and the other houses. I was also very surprised here for the first time that. Okay, can I just make this last point? Because it was a new thing that came out in the meeting today, I think it's important. Chris said that one of the proposals is they're going to take drainage through to Summerhouse Drive. I wonder how they're going to do that. Thank you very much for listening to me. I'm sorry if I sounded a bit nervous, but in front of all these happy smiling faces, it was quite daunting.
Well, yes, you can, yeah. Our next speaker is Councillor Steve Ayres, please. 5 minutes, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Steve Ayres, Councillor for Graves Park Ward. First of all, may I express disappointment for both Councillor Maroof and myself as ward councillors, and indeed on behalf of several of the other 37 objectors who have contacted us, at having received no advance formal notification that a decision on this application was set to be made today. I needed to get that on record. All three Graves Park Ward councillors have put in our own objections, as is described in the report on page 56. Despite 38 objections and none in support, officers are recommending approval. This is a controversial application, and I see no record on the planning portal of any agreed extension to its expiry date. I understand Mr Keyworth, who is a local resident, is also unable to attend due to work commitments, has emailed colleagues with a number of questions in the supplementary report, and I wonder whether officers could respond to those specifically. Specifically the paragraph at the top of page 6 of the report regarding the designation in the emerging local plan. To be clear to colleagues, on the 9th of September 2024, and I have the correspondence, Councillor Maroof and I reaffirmed our support for the redesignation of land from housing area in the 98 UDP to urban green space in the consulted upon, democratically voted on and published draft local plan. And the sub-map, sub-area, South Sheffield sub-area map clearly identifies the site as urban green space. So clearly there were no objections, no formal objections at the Regulation 19 stage, because it was on the map as urban green space. As objectors have asked, why deal with this change in designation in this way rather than through proper public consultation? What is the point of a local plan that is consulted on and voted on if the designations can be altered so easily? The site is on land that was identified and designated as a strategic green corridor in the City Council's 1991 Nature Conservation Strategy and a later planning commitment for the now developed site adjacent 13/02892/FUL, former Oaks Park School, Matthews Lane, Summerhouse Drive and Waterfall Close, was given to retain it as not suitable for future development, and it should be retained as part of the green space link. Crucially for me, and Mr Blagden mentioned this as well, condition 17 on the highways access and parking is completely inadequate, given the cumulative negative consequence of other developments within the area, including the development of St James's Retail Park and Bogan Parkway, which have impacted significantly on the local highway network, not least of all on Norton Lane in terms of volume, accompanied by mounting highway safety concerns from local parents and residents. The traffic calming measures referred to in the original AMA's highway supporting statement are totally ineffective and contradict the applicant's own speed survey data produced by NDC that states that between 4th and 10th of February, to the north and south of the site, up to 36 axle lorries passed the proposed site entrance in any one day, and over the period between 1,170 and 2,601, mind you, vehicles were driving over the police limit. That is clearly stated in the applicant's own data. I worry there will be a serious collision if this scheme goes ahead. Local residents have been calling for a 20-mile-an-hour scheme and legally enforced weight restriction on Norton Lane since yet to be developed application 21-01808/FUL for 14 two-bed apartments on Norton Lane was given approval.
5 minutes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
So, shortly following that approval, a pedestrian, an elderly person, was reported by the local press as having been injured in a road traffic collision on the pedestrian crossing. God forbid we should have a child fatality on our consciences as corporate parents. I mentioned
Steve,
that
you're into
yeah,
six,
I'm bringing
you're into
this,
6
yeah,
minutes.
I hope that colleagues will support the 38 objections by voting against the officer's recommendations, or as a minimum, defer their decision today on the basis that there are material issues outstanding. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Chris, would you like to come back on any of that?
I will, Chair, and I may enlist the help of Helen on the highways matters. Just no particular order, probably the order they were raised in actually, and apologies if they jump about a little bit. So I think the first thing is already addressed to some extent, but the reference to there being 21 conditions, as I said, that's very typical on a scheme of this nature, and I would disagree with the comment that something will get put in and we'll say that'll do, that's fine. We actually reject, I would say, quite a high proportion of conditions applications when they're submitted. The report that's submitted is inadequate, it doesn't cover the right things, the measures that they're suggesting are inadequate, or the quality of what's been proposed is poor. So I would just assure members that we will that there's information that's submitted within the conditions will have to be right for us to approve it, and also that we wouldn't leave something that was so fundamental purely to be dealt with by condition if we weren't satisfied that there was an acceptable solution. We talked about, just on that, and hope to answer some of the other points, drainage was mentioned in a lot of the representations, it's been mentioned again today. What's happened there, as an example, is two options have been put forward. Either are acceptable to drainage colleagues. I don't know the details of how that would then find its way through Summer House Drive, if that was the case. But either are acceptable in drainage terms, and it's the detail that needs to follow for us to be able to approve it at this stage. The reason it works that way is we're encouraged to deal with applications quickly by the government, and if we waited till every issue was resolved in fine detail, such that we weren't imposing any conditions, applications would take years, Chair, and clog the system. That, I don't think it's an excessive amount of conditions, it's quite typical. There was reference to the green space needing to be kept, but I think perhaps I'll answer that in one of the later questions. In terms of the drainage system being overburdened, as I say, the strategy being put forward is considered acceptable. It does include a form of attenuation, i.e. there's a condition which limits the flow rate. Again, that's a quite typical measure in dealing with particularly surface water. Its rate of discharge into the network to avoid flooding further downstream. The car parking reference to 26 spaces, I'm not sure that's right. I was looking for the, I believe it's 31. It's in the report. But as we've said in the report, that's actually in excess of our guidance. It is 31. The guidelines would say 25 to 26 based on the type of houses. So we've got 31 spaces. While the representation was going forward, I totted up the number of bedrooms just as a matter of interest for members, and I think we're at about 34 bedrooms. So it's 36 perhaps. So it's almost one parking space per bedroom, which, if you think about it, Chair, is quite considerable provision. In terms of the people, there's reference to bats, deer, badgers, foxes, hedgehogs, etc. Not being certain where they lived, but them being present within the area. Well, that is the case, Chair. There's no kind of doubt in that. But the ecology survey that was undertaken confirmed that none of them actually live on the site. As I said in my introduction, the only potential for that was in one particular tree. It is one that's been removed, but they weren't present at that time. It's the kind of tree that offered the potential. It won't be the case that tree is locked while they're removed while they're bats resident, if indeed they do decide to take residence, because the condition prevents that we mentioned earlier. How many letters of support? Councillor Ayres is correct, there were no letters of support. The urban green space designation, I can't speak in great detail on that, Chair, because it's the plan making side of the service that deals with that. But I understand that that was included by mistake. Whether it was a drafting error on the plan, I'm not certain. But it is currently housing. That is its current designation. And if properties were bought over recent years and solicitors were identifying what neighbouring land was identified for, it would have said housing, because that is the current designation. It's correct that the urban green space designation hasn't been objected to through the rounds of the stages of the local plan preparation that's gone on so far, and therefore that is being considered by government. But it carries very little weight, and as we've said in the in the report and in my presentation at the beginning, there is nothing within the policy that aligns with that designation in the draft policy, that again has little weight, that aligns with that designation that will prevent development of the site in the manner proposed. There was reference again to the green network and the wildlife corridors, if you like, which is, and that's why we've demonstrated with this slide why the site is part of a much wider network, but also that the development of it leaves significant areas around it for wildlife to travel, around and within it, for wildlife to travel. The reference, I think the suggestion was it was in perhaps an officer report on a 1991 application that the site wasn't suitable for residential development. As we said in our introduction, and we often say, Chair, each site's considered on its own merits at the time of its consideration in accordance with the relevant policies. We're now obviously some considerable time from 1991. UDP has effectively superseded that permission, that consideration of that permission. We've then had the core strategy, we've got an emerging plan, we've got a national planning policy framework, and a housing shortage, Chair. All those things are different considerations from the cases would have been in 1991. I think everything else relates to highways, Chair, and I noted those to be a fundamental problem with the access on a blind bend. Reference to the surveys, the assessments being acknowledging and being carried out in the knowledge of over a quarter of cars speeding along that road. And I think the car parking provision, but I think I've perhaps answered the car parking provision question. So I think it's mainly about the access and traffic generation, perhaps in the area, including from the St James development, for Helen to answer, please.
Thanks, Chair. In terms of the access, obviously one of the things that we look at in particular is the visibility, in terms of visibility for vehicles exiting the new access, and also the forward visibility for vehicles using the existing Norton Lane. It is a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, and the guidance that we have, we can refer to, say, it's 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, that's what we need. In this particular instance, because we were mindful of concerns about an access in that location, we did ask the developer to undertake some speed surveys, and as has been said, they were done over a week in 2 sites, basically tubes across the highway. What it was found was that the average 85th percentile speed was 29.8 miles an hour northbound and 32.5 miles an hour southbound at site 1. Sorry, the sites were just either side of the proposed access location. And 29.7 miles an hour northbound and 30.4 miles per hour southbound at site 2. Now, it's the 85th percentile speed that we use, not just Sheffield, nationally, in terms of calculating visibility displays. Using those 85th percentile speeds, the displays to the south, I think, are 46, is required to be 46 metres, and the display to the north, 42 metres, both of which are shown on the plan as being achievable. Again, the forward visibility for cars having visibility of somebody turning into the site or turning out of the site while they're travelling on Norton Lane, again, that forward visibility is shown as being achievable on the plans. So from our perspective, we consider that an access can be provided in that location. In terms of traffic generation, yes, I accept that there will have been, a considerable increase in traffic in the locality over the years. However, this site on its own would actually generate something in the order of probably between 110 and 120 vehicle movements per day, which would equate, I would suggest, to probably 10 two-way movements in the morning and evening peaks. That level of traffic generation would not be considered to require highway mitigation, and would not be considered to be of such an impact that it would likely to create a severe highway impact. And so again, I think in terms of the traffic generation from the site, that was considered to be acceptable. I think the car parking Chris has covered. And I would just say as well that actually the car parking guidelines that are quoted are actually maximum guidelines. So, you know, the site is providing over and above, whether you agree or not, realistically what our policy says should be being provided. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Helen. We'll now move to members' questions. I've got Cliff, because Cliff has got one to bring up that we talked about in...
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just wondering what level of noise would be created for residents who live nearby. I mean, I've never lived near an operating building site, and just wondering, can you give some guidance as to what sort of noisy machines they tend to use and what we can expect?
I'm sorry, Chair, but I don't think I can. I don't have any kind of measure of sort of decibel levels or anything like that, but there's obviously a lot of noise generated by construction, both in terms of individuals on the site, machinery, large-scale machinery, tools, etc. But I couldn't begin to say any more than that, Chair.
Henry?
Thank you, Chair. Chris, is there any chance you could put up the image from map 4 relating to the green corridors? As much as that seems to show this site as part of a large swathe of sort of open land that animals could use to transition in and out of various bits that then lead to other parts of Sheffield's wonderful green space. If you look at an aerial map, to the south you've got housing that becomes increasingly dense towards as you go towards the sort of low edges, and to the northeast you've got increasing amounts of housing going up towards Gleedless. To the east you've got Oaks Park, which then goes into a huge swathe of open land that heads down to sort of Chesterfield, Johnfield and beyond. And to the west you've got Graves Park, which connects to Lees Hall Woods, where I see deer while I'm walking the dogs, Cobner Wood and so on. And yeah, it's a corridor, but this site in particular is at a bottleneck in that corridor, and it really feels like developing on this plot of land is hammering a cork into that bottleneck. And the report says that on average it's still a fairly green area, but the nature of corridors is if you put a wall across them...
Henry, can I ask if there's a question?
Yeah, please. It is. If you put a wall across a corridor, it's now mainly corridor, but functionally, it's lost all of its use. Are we really saying that this isn't going to take, 80, 90% of the green connected space out of that corridor?
The simple answer to that, Chair, is we are saying that it allows for movement and maintains the principles of the network. And why do we say that? Well, I wish these slides were in a slightly different order. So I understand the point that's been made, Chair, that just on that particular image, there is, if you like, large area of green space to the west, large area of green space to the east, and then the red line of the boundary almost fills a gap between the urban development, if you like, to the north and south of it. But the view we've taken is that you've got the the green space associated with the school, you can see on that image there, just the other side of Matthews Lane from the space to the west. There's the green space in the front of the properties on Waterfall Close there. So you've only got kind of 3 houses punctuating that, all of which have gardens where some of the wildlife will be able to travel through. And then when you get down to the layout, so the hedges, the trees largely, trees and hedgerows along the west and east, of the site are being retained almost entirely, apart from the loss of T18, which is where the kink is. So that of itself is, we feel, a link, understandably, admittedly for some species more than others. The bottom portion of the site is completely untouched outside the red line. And then when you get into the site, I don't know which of these shows it the best, but the light green, if you like, are the existing areas that are being retained. Either of these demonstrates what I'm trying to say. The green areas, the brighter green areas, are the ones that are being retained, and the darker green, in both cases, are areas of new planting, etc., or areas of slightly open space, other than and in addition to neighbouring gardens. So we feel that the linkages are there that don't provide a full break in the link, full break in the network. Yes, it'll be slightly constrained, or more so than it is at present, as a completely open field. But we don't feel it fundamentally conflicts with the policy because of the reasons I've explained.
Thanks, Chris. Marion?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I just wanted to put on record something that Councillor Harris raised as well, and it's the one of the representations with regards to objectors not being notified that the application's been taken to committee. I mean, I've raised this before, and I just think it'd be much better for democracy and transparency if objectors were actually kept in the loop. But I've got a couple of questions. So, one, just for clarification, just to check the designation under the emerging local plan, I mean, I know this can only be given limited weight. So there was an error regarding the adjoining field and the water tower, is that correct? So that should have been urban green space too, but it actually got classified as residential by mistake, is that?
No, Chair, it's the other way around. This site should have maintained its residential zone, as it's called in the emerging plan, alongside the other 2 fields up to and including the water tower. It's this one that is the mistake, and that it was mistakenly identified as urban green space.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. And then just turning to page 58 and policy G10, and you know, I've listened to your response to Councillor Nottage. I just think, you know, the purpose of this is to protect strategic corridors. These are connected landscapes linking protected areas, and they're not just pathways, they're lifelines for our natural world. And we've heard, you know, from you that this is just a field, but we've also heard from the other Michael that there are badgers, foxes and hedgehogs. And the point is that this is a migratory corridor, and that's why it's been designated as a strategic corridor. So they're the effectiveness of these corridors hinges on formal protection. So creating something of a break and allowing for movement isn't really protection. It seems somewhat irresponsible in my view. But it also seems inconsistent with previous commitments. So I suppose my question is, you know, strategic corridors are strategic for a reason. And on the portal, many of the comments refer to a previous commitment that the strategic corridor wouldn't be developed. And I think everyone says it was 10 years ago. Could we have a bit more information about that? I mean, I do understand what you said about the decision needs to be made on its own merits, but I think it's useful context for the committee to understand that commitment that was made 10 years ago and what's changed.
Thanks, Chair. So I'm not aware of what that commitment was, other than the reference to the previous permission that was for an adjoining site that was a pre-UDP decision. I'm not aware of any other commitment that was made, and I don't know what that commitment was. In fact, I've not seen reference to a particular document, so I'm afraid I can't answer what that was. In terms of just something I wanted to pick up on in the first comment about keeping objectors in the loop, that we do talk about this a lot at committee, and when we send out our neighbour notification letters, we explain that with the volume of objections that we get to planning applications, we can't possibly keep on top of communication with every single person. So we say within the letters that go out to people, if you want to keep progress of an application, there's an ability to track it on the portal. So people do that. People do have the option to do that. And they're reminded of that when they make their comments. When they go onto the portal to make their comments, it again reminds them that we don't enter into dialogue with objectors. You know, we also get loads of emails following notification of applications asking lots of questions, but we're just not in the don't have the ability to do that because of the volume of them. So we kind of say it's up to the objector effectively, up to or person in support to keep tabs on the progress of the application. We do, when there is let's say there's you know, in this case we had 30 objections. If there was a friends of group or something, or a lead contact, then we'll do our best to let them know. But as I say, we do make it clear that we can't do that. So yeah, the previous commitment in terms of the to what we have or haven't said about the site in the past, I'm not sure what it is. It's not been made clear to me. And I think in terms of G10, we've said within the report, and I've attempted to kind of expand on that, why we think in this case it's acceptable. But we feel that the way that the low density nature of the site, the additional planting, etc., that's going in, the retention of existing connections around the site is sufficient to ensure it meets the terms of the policy, Chair.
Willis?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Could I just ask you to go back to the slide with the migration routes on the slide that Councillor Nottage asked for? So could you just explain where each one is? So I take it that the northern one, where it sort of goes north to the top of the image, is towards Hemsworth Road, and then the one where it splits off is the site where we're developing. But could you explain where the one just to the south of it is? So in terms of the arrows, it's the bottom arrow of the three that are in the northeast. Because I've got an aerial map up on my phone. I'm off Google. I can't really see where that's supposed to be. Because I take it it's supposed to be a green corridor, but I can't see a green space for that, because it's all housing there.
I think that kind of sort of demonstrates the point, Chair, that it's not, they aren't corridors, they aren't arrows, for want of a better expression, that neatly follow areas of existing green space. They are diagrammatic identification of where networks exist, or where there's the potential for them to exist. So I, without a wider plan myself, can't tell you exactly where those arrows are leading to or which areas they cover. But as we said earlier, as Councillor Nottage was pointing out, they will be across areas such as Graves Park, leading into Oaks Park, the golf courses to the west, and the site we're considering is the small red circle, almost in the centre of the page. And you can, yes, you're right. The green, because of the diagrammatic nature, the green on the plan sits above quite a lot of housing in certain places. They're not intended to follow a neat replication of what's on the ground, Chair.
Thank you. It's just, the reason why I'm asking that is because I can't. I appreciate that they're supposed to be diagrammatic, but with reference sort of the deer and the sort of larger animal, obviously like avian animals can fly over, it's not a problem for them, but for ground animals, I'm sort of looking at it, the one that sort of goes up toward, again I appreciate it, it's diagrammatic and not precise, but the one that goes north towards Hemsworth Road, there's lots of housing development. Well, deer's not going to look for a housing estate, is it? Or foxes and badgers will be intimidated by it, and I appreciate that once it's built, it's been designed so that there is space for animals to go through. But whilst it's being built, it's a construction site. You know, it'll scare animals off, and you know, it doesn't take much for an animal to come, you know, change its migration route or where it goes forever. So I'm just wondering whether or not the fact that there isn't the other two arrows, not including the one that's for the site that's being proposed today, aren't really viable for most animals to use as a migration or movement channel, whereas, and this will shut off what to my eye looks like the last available one to them, at least whilst it's being built.
Sufficient detail, Chair, to comment on what is within the other corridors and which animals might or might not use them. The purpose of this was to try of using this slide was to try and demonstrate the size of the site effectively in relation to the strategic nature of the aims. I don't know the answer to your question. You know, where exactly those routes go and which animals engage with those routes. And yes, construction activity would obviously significantly impact on, for that period, use of any site by wildlife. And yes, some may not return, but you know, as we experienced during the pandemic, nature very quickly returns to areas of urban development when the opportunity arises, and that's what we've tried to do here to create the linkages within it.
Andy?
Thanks, Chair. I just want to go back to your photo of your slide 19 and your condition 4 and the drainage and the non-specific nature of this condition, given that this land is largely above waterfall close. Surely, the way I read this condition and the way I read what I've listened to the first objector today and also one or two of the other objectors, very concerned that the surface water will run onto waterfall close. And I don't see this condition 4 as anything like specific enough, and I don't understand where you're putting a pump. I don't understand what happens, what's the reliability of the pump. I don't understand the drainage solution offered here. And I don't understand how we're addressing the objectors' questions about sewage and the fact that the tanks are currently at capacity. I don't understand how such a general condition, to look at it in the future, addresses these concerns at this point in time.
Chair, the questions of capacity and everything that is part of Yorkshire Water and our land drainage team, these days referred to as the Legal Local Flood Authority. That is part of their remit to identify to us when a site comes forward where there is limited capacity or there are capacity issues. They've not done that in this case. They've said the capacity is fine. So the capacity issue isn't an issue as far as we're concerned for the site. In terms of the pump, that is one option. The preferred option is a gravity-fed solution into Norton Lane, and that is what all parties, I think, would prefer to see, but and that is likely to be the one that comes forward. But it's also possible as an alternative that a pump system might be involved, and that's a relatively common occurrence, Chair, because even with flat sites, water needs to be pumped from to get it along its route. So we don't get details of that kind of thing at this stage. It's a matter for the kind of the drainage engineers in designing it to provide an acceptable scheme, one that works, that is then assessed by our drainage team, who will say it's either acceptable or it isn't. And it's not something that we would ever ask for at this stage of planning application. What we ask for is the site capable of being drained? In other words, is there sufficient capacity in the neighbouring network? And if the answer to that is yes, then we would, in all cases, proceed to dealing with the detail of it by condition.
Marion?
Thank you, Chair. It was actually just to come back to Councillor Marshall's question, and because the application refers to map 4 of the Green Network, I just searched that up, and actually it's a slightly different drawing, but I found it much clearer and easier to understand. If you want to look that up, just Google it.
Thanks, Marion.
Map 4 Green Network, Sheffield.
Any more questions? No? Either?
Just a clarification, Chair. 13 units, does that not exceed the threshold for affordable housing? Forgive me if this is included in the agenda pack.
No, it doesn't. The threshold's 15. So it can't be a consideration because the policy doesn't require it to be.
We'll move to members' comments, but before we do that, I have 2 proposals to put forward that we discussed in closed session. The first is that we change the hours that the developer can work on the houses that back onto, or the development that backs onto Waterfall Close. And we alter it to something along the lines of 8 till 5, 8 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock at night, no Saturday, no Sunday, no bank holiday working. Can I have a seconder, please? And,
Are you proposing this?
yeah, I propose it. What?
Chair, can I just note that what you're talking about is within the directives. There is.
Sorry, it is a directive.
It's within the directives. There is a list of suggested inclusion in what Chris calls the KEMP, the Construction Environmental Management Plan. So I think that's what you're proposing is an amendment to that directive. Yep. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, sorry, I forgot he was director, so. Andrew. Can I have a show of hands, please? Unanimous.
Okay, thank you.
The next proposal I have is that we write to all the residents, or planners write to all the residents on Waterfall Close, advising them of this change of the directive of the times. That all of them that back onto that development site are fully aware of the times that we've altered for those new builds. So that's my proposal. Can I have a second again? Laura? Show of hands, please. Right, thank you, unanimous. Yeah, I'll put mine up. Those wordings will be compiled by Chris and myself. Right, got it all, Chris? Right. So we'll move on to comments. We've got Henry and then Marion.
Thank you, Chair. I'm no expert in the movement of roe deer, but I'm a keen amateur and I have a very real fear that this will block a strategic green corridor and stop them moving from open countryside into significant parts of Sheffield's green spaces. And as such, the ecological damage will outweigh the benefits. So I will not be voting for this recommendation.
Marianne?
Thank you, Chair. Similar, I think, you know, instead of considering this site as an individual and disconnected green spot, it really needs to be considered together with other green and blue areas that together form a green infrastructure which functions should be seen as an ecosystem. And these strategic corridors are part of our response to the challenges of biodiversity loss and climate change. And, you know, I do note the officers say it's not a break in the network. And it would remain quite green, but I'm just not convinced this explanation is good enough and that we're really considering encroaching on a wildlife corridor, a strategic wildlife corridor for 13 houses, you know, and a massive concrete car park, so for 31 vehicles. So, yeah, for that reason, I'll be voted against. Thank you.
Andy?
Thank you, Chair. I will be voting against this development. It's an unsustainable development on a greenfield that's never been built on, as far as we know. We've had a whole patchwork across Norton over the last 30 years, and clearly, you know, Oak School was closed, and you know, clearly we've built on that. But we've had lots of little bits of development here and there with no master plan. The infrastructure's struggling. Norton Lane, clearly when we went on the site visit, some of us struggled, some of our colleagues struggled on site visit to cross the road at 30 miles per hour. And we've heard that not all cars keep to 30 miles per hour as is. So we've got concerns about the access to the site, but fundamentally it's the loss of a green corridor. This is and all the local plan discussions, the need to keep this green space in Norton. So there is a clear nature corridor connecting Graves Park with Oaks Park. We've already lost part of that with this mismatch, this hodgepodge of development over the last 30 years. This is an opportunity with a local plan to have a clear corridor for nature, and we would lose it with this development, so I'll be voting against.
Laura?
I do share many of those concerns, but I'm swayed to support it because it is designated as housing land. So I think the developer would have a very strong case to pursue it.
Mark?
In an ideal world, no bits of green would be built on, but every house in Sheffield has been built on what was originally green. Each generation is expanding Sheffield. Sheffield does keep expanding. Other areas of the city are getting greenfield developments. I'm afraid this is not a massive development, and I will be voting for it. Thank you.
Any further comments? No. Can we move to a vote? So those in favour of the officer's decision, which includes the two proposals we did, can I have a show of hands, please? 4? Yeah, sorry, I'll be voting for, yeah. Against? Any abstentions? I'm going to make a casting vote because it's, I think so, I vote for. Right. That's passed, thank you. Item 8, which is a record of planning appeal submissions and decisions, page 68 onwards on the agenda. We don't have Brian here, so can you just note them, please? And thank you very much, everyone.
I can answer that question.
Marianne?
on this item. So at page 73, there is reference to a failed attempt to appeal a committee decision with regards to the Riverside walkway. And the inspector in the appeal decision referred to the development being completed in breach of the original condition. The applicant has attempted to argue that the pathway agreed under the condition couldn't be built, but they didn't manage to successfully demonstrate that. So my question is, have steps now indicated that they will comply with the outstanding condition in accordance with the planning committee decision, and what timescale can we expect them to do that in? Thank you.
The answer to that question, Chair, is not as yet. So we have started talking to them about, I think it's maybe about 3 weeks or so since we've had the decision. But the answer is no as yet. They haven't indicated that they are going to go ahead. And if you remember, if you were present at the committee meeting, there is an existing approval for a 3-metre version that goes into the riverbank more, takes out more trees, etc., which is one of the reasons they didn't want to do that. So they have, their options include, well, are effectively limited to doing that, building what they already have consent for, or the inspector actually alluded to an understanding as to why that they wouldn't want to do that, but in the inspector's comments they suggested there was plenty of space within the site, and for those members that were on the site visit, they'll recall we were in the garden effectively of the facility. So the inspector was effectively saying, whilst there might be reasons not to go further into the riverbank or over the riverbank, there is land within the garden side that could be utilised. So that would be another option for them to come forward with a revised proposal that that followed that line, which would probably better connect to the route that is in next door. And the other option is that they don't do either, and that then requires us to seek to enforce. So they're the 3 options really, but we haven't had a clear indication of their intention to comply at this stage.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much, everyone.